explaining how the blockchain works by using an idea of involving cupcakes.
Yeah.
But you can't do it. There is no easy way. So I work for both Artos Systems and the Aventus Protocol Foundation. The Aventus Protocol Foundation is a not-for-profit foundation which is dedicated to building an open ticketing protocol for the industry as a whole. So we are very open to feedback, criticism, suggestions, discussions. We've got a lot of in-house knowledge. We've got some great people, both on the ticketing side and on the blockchain side. But we do see it as an open and ongoing conversation. One of the ways we like to talk about what we've done is a lot of the banks came together and worked as a unit to use blockchain technology to help with their international settlement, for example. So we think about what we're doing as, well, ideally, what would have happened if the ticketing industry as a whole had done that. That's our philosophy, that's how we're approaching the work we're doing. So we are not a ticket agency, we don't intend to act like one. We are a software provider who specializes in blockchain technology, and our solutions are open source. In addition to that, I also work for Artos Systems, and we are a service provider who utilize the Aventus Protocol. So you can work with the Aventus Protocol, or you can work with us if you need additional services around that. So I'm not going to talk too much about technical side of the blockchain, but what I will do is touch on some of the issues that David mentioned in terms of what's going on behind the scenes to a certain degree. So one of the brilliant things that you'll hear about the blockchain is that it's an immutable source of information. Now, immutable obviously means it cannot be changed. And that's very useful, obviously, if you're trying to track the ownership of something over time, like a ticket, for example. Now, we work with the Ethereum blockchain, which is, has much richer functionality than, say, the Bitcoin blockchain that you might have heard about. The Ethereum blockchain has the ability to run business logic in the form of smart contracts. A smart contract is a set of rules, a piece of business logic that you can deploy publicly, but you can still control it, and you can hide anything you want to hide from people. So it still is public, but it's obfuscated if you want it to be. So if we think about that in the context of ticketing, it means we can think about a ticket on the blockchain as something that has its own set of rules that other people have to follow. So if you have a conventional software architecture, the ticket will exist in your database, and you'll send an email or whatever you do to give that ticket to someone. In the case of the blockchain, that ticket, if you choose it to be, can be stored in a way which has a set of rules associated with it. So the properties David was talking about in terms of the secondary market, that's a manifestation of those rules. So those rules could be anything from you cannot resell it to you can resell it under certain conditions. And this extra control that can give you is very important. And again, in terms of the Aventus Protocol Foundation, the flexibility for the inventory owner is the key part of this. We are not dictating those rules. We are going to give you a set of tools to help define those rules, and then you can enforce those rules on your inventory. So, actually, I want to touch on something else as well. So the nature of the access control solution as well you were talking about, where it doesn't work if you do a screenshot. That's because it's using the underlying cryptography that works with the whole blockchain. It's not an easy thing to explain, but it's fundamental everything, but that's the kind of thing I'd happily explain to any of you over a beer or a coffee another time if you're interested, but that is a fundamental property of the blockchain, and it's obviously very useful in that context. So what I will do is talk about some of the terminology that you may hear today or that you may have heard before. So Steve mentioned decentralization. So obviously the word decentralization begs the question of what? And in the case of a public blockchain like Ethereum, it's essentially the decentralization of who can do what with the protocol. So anyone can do what they want to do as long as they follow the rules. There is no central authority that can take that power away from them or remove them from the system as long as they follow the rules. Now, decentralization is a typical feature of public blockchains. So we've also got the public versus private question here. Public blockchains are decentral by nature, realistically speaking. Private ones are not. So a private blockchain is typically behind some sort of similar form of authentication you'd get with a normal web server. Philip's going to talk about some of their challenges around the whole public versus private discussion, because it's a choice that can work in certain circumstances and not so in others. You may have also heard about tokens and ICOs. If you haven't, I hope I'm not overcomplicating this, but Ethereum, the nature of Ethereum is that you can run essentially additional tokens or currency-like tokens on the same protocol. And these tokens can have various uses. Some of them you may have heard of are not much more than a scam, it's true. But some of them are also very useful in terms of what they're trying to achieve, in terms of how the protocols work, and to try and govern the behaviour of the various participants. Transparency is an interesting one, because when we talk about transparency, we talk about the fact that the blockchain itself is open and it is public. So that does mean that you can record information there which can be viewed by anyone that has access to the blockchain. What that doesn't mean, of course, is that you write your sensitive business information and make it public. There's absolutely no need to do that. So again, to use an example of, and obviously Zecatic essentially is a private chain, but the logic is still the same, in that ticket information that's used by the access control system could be public to a certain degree, because the identifiers that are used don't need to have any meaning other than the access control system, essentially. Again, it's part of the cryptography thing, which I'm happy to talk about if someone asks. Finally, scalability. So it's often mentioned that Ethereum especially has a very low transaction per second count, and that is true. But there's a couple of things that are relevant to that. So first of all, a transaction in the context of what we're talking about here isn't necessarily a ticket. A transaction can incorporate all sorts of different things, and in a simpler sense, it could include multiple tickets. But at the same time, first of all, there are some additional projects going on to improve the scalability of this, to get it to, the common thing people talk about is sort of Visa, MasterCard system level of transactions, and there are a lot of projects out there that can make that happen. But at the same time, you can get a lot of benefits of the blockchain by using it as that source of truth you can fall back on. You don't need to record everything on there. So there's a lot of transactions that, say, as part of the ticketing and on sale, for example, are useful, and some of them are not useful. So, yeah, that's basically the terminology. Another example, actually, picking up on something Steve said about the idea of a standard. So, the access control is a really good example of that. So, it's possible that you can store a ticket, whatever that looks like, in a relatively simple form on a public blockchain. And in doing so, in that simple form, that in itself could be seen as a standard. But there is still more than one way you can deal with the access control for that ticket. So again, the example that you referred to is exactly the kind of thing we advocate. It makes a lot of sense. It's very good at stopping the classic screenshot and sharing thing. But the point is, you could do it any way you like. The actual code required is relatively simple. You could incorporate it into existing access control solutions, and likewise, both for the user and for the door. But essentially, we're talking about barcodes here, but how they're generated and what they mean can have many different implementations. So that's actually it for me. I just wanted to go through these high-level things, but Philip will talk about some of their challenges.
Great. Thanks, Andy.